everybody? Welcome back to the MasterMinds podcast. I'm K Webb here with my boy C Life. What's up, sir?
What's up, y'all? What's up,
Uh,
man?
you ready for this?
I listen. I'm ready.
Just so we can bring everybody up to speed on where we are, we in this country, the Supreme Court of the United States has laid out some pretty heavy hitting rulings. One
Hmm.
that shocked the consciousness of the nation is their overturning the Supreme Court precedent of Roe versus Wade that established a constitutional right to abortion for women. And so our podcast tonight is Roe v. Wade Uncut. And no format, no flow. We're just gonna go and see where we end up on this. So before we came on, I wanted to read some of what the decision was, what was argued, all of those things, because I know my boy Carson is going to come with facts and information. I got to be on my game. And so um yeah, so Roe v. Wade overturned. It's not the law of the land anymore. The Supreme Court remanded the regulation of abortions to the states, the people, and their elected representatives. Uh, just broad strokes. What say you about the Supreme Court? Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? What are your thoughts?
um, Before I say if they got it right or wrong,
Okay.
I think that because of the where our country is, this could potentially be something that is a sort of snowball effect. And I think that creates a sort of anxiety for a lot of people. It's just the beginning of more similar uh,
Well,
movements by the Supreme Court to take away rights, and I'll put a quotation around that, rights. So is next gonna be some of the other things? Uh, you've heard things about same-sex marriage. Is they gonna question that? You've heard things about maybe affirmative action is some was people were kicking around.
interracial
So
marriage also.
interracial marriage. I think be, because of because our country is polarized, right, and we've kind of moved away from the nuance and away from the gray areas as it relates to these conversations. People are just kind of nervous. That being said, I I do I do think that I do think that this should be a state issue. I do think that it should be a state issue. Um, and that's primarily because I think that there are um, more, there are people in particular states in the country
Mhm.
that would be more likely to vote against this law.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But that's also because at this point, it's hard for me to kind of um, balance because I'm definitely on the side of this is not about uh, reproductive rights holistically, right? This is not a conversation of reproductive rights. Uh, and this is not a conversation, from my perspective, of maternal rights or uh, the bodily autonomy of women, right? So, and I'll start there. And
Okay.
I know that probably is gonna, you know,
All right. So I'm gonna try to
be
recap.
difficult.
So basically, you're in agreement that there should not be a national law that the states should decide this on a state by state basis because there are people in certain states that would say yes, there are others would say no, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, because the alternative is the a continuing polarizing situation, right? So if it's a this is either illegal or legal, like some
Mhm.
people are trying to sway this conversation, that's going to be highly problematic for states like New York and states like California, who are more liberal progressive states.
Yep.
And so but then if Texas gets Texas way, then it becomes illegal and potentially criminalized, which was what Roe v. Wade was originally about. So it's in those situations, it's like the country is not um, a monolith on this issue, and so we should take it down to the next democratic level, which would be
Which would be this.
states. State, yeah,
Okay. So there's something in there that, in theory, that makes sense. Theoretically, that works, but there is very little about the governance of the states or this nation that is democratic, right?
yeah,
And so then how do we separate the ideal, right? Ideally, it would be go from the to the left to the next democratic level when we know that those things are not democratic, right? So that's
yeah,
point one.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but wouldn't it make more sense, or wouldn't it be better for there to be the right to bodily autonomy, to privacy, to make these healthcare decisions? Although we'll caveat and say this ruling probably was not about any of those. There's something different. But
Hmm.
wouldn't it be better to say, okay, it is possible for you to do this, and those who are not in favor of it just don't do it, as opposed to saying no one can do it, right? That becomes the infringement on your freedoms, infringing on mine because of your beliefs, and they outweigh mine.
Well, I mean, I think that argument takes certain assumptions,
Okay, let's
right?
go with it.
One of the assumptions is uh, that this is primarily a religious or moral issue, when potentially it's not. Does the science back what's being said by the left, and by progressives who would suggest that this is entirely a choice of women's bodily autonomy? Um, Whatever it is, whether you say it is a baby, a fetus, a zygote, it is other than the body of a woman. That
Right?
is a scientific fact.
Yes.
It may be dependent on the body of a woman,
Yeah.
but it is not.
Okay.
It
Okay.
is its own body
It is.
as
However,
far as DNA is concerned and as far as genetic makeup is concerned.
okay. So
Yeah.
that zygote fetus,
Would you concede that point that it is other than scientifically the body of a woman?
it is not. It is part of that body. It is part of the
It's
woman.
not. It's not.
You can't. You
It's
can't.
dependent on it.
So that makes it a part. It's like you can't detach it from this woman's body and then it still lives.
It is not more the woman's body than it is the man's body as far as genetics. It is just dependent on the mother's body because the mother is a mother because she has a womb,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
it's theoretically,
It's
if
growing in the
science
woman's body.
afforded us, if science afforded us the ability to create a womb outside of a woman,
Then it wouldn't be
we
part
would
of.
have something to put in that womb from
Okay.
the woman that
Okay.
is not the woman,
All right.
right? So the issue becomes the what the child or the zygote or the clump of cells, whatever you want to call it, is dependent on. But that level, the amount of dependence changes over time,
Over time.
but the DNA, the genetic makeup of what is dependent doesn't change.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that one. So in the scenario where a woman has a fertilized egg, has this thing in her, and going with the opinion or the thoughts of those who say abortion should be illegal. If the woman, the mother, the host, the one that's carrying the baby says, I want an abortion, the law says you cannot abort the unborn, then you're giving that zygote, those cells, more rights than the living person.
No,
right?
you're giving them equal rights as a living
No,
person. Yeah.
no, because
Yeah.
because so here's what it is. In that you're saying, okay, woman, you don't want this thing, but you can't take it out of you, right?
Yeah.
Because if you take it out of you, it dies, and
Yes.
that's murder. So their rights, its rights, are more important than yours.
So this is when it goes into morality. So the first thing I just wanted to establish is that there at least has to be a sort of agreement on that whatever this is, it is not. It is
Not the woman.
uniquely different and distinct from the woman's actual body, though
Yes.
inside and dependent on the woman's body.
Okay.
Now, the difference between it as a fertilized egg versus it as a baby is time and development. That's it. Time and
Yes.
development. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So genetically it doesn't change. The DNA doesn't change. What changes is the amount of time that is developing and the stage of development that makes it able to survive outside, not without, but outside of the woman, but not without of the woman. Remember, it's technology that affords us the ability to give a child, let's say, formula. Without that technology, which was formula outside of the womb, will be equated to if we had a mechanical scientific womb. It's still an absolute necessity for the survival of the baby. So what is changing is the location of the baby. A baby as a baby is still just as dependent on its mother for food, for protection, and for shelter in order for it to develop even outside of the womb.
So you're forcing a person who would otherwise choose not to have that develop, right?
Have what develop?
Zygote, cells, baby, embryo, egg, whatever. You're telling this human doesn't matter what you want because you laid up, you allow the egg and the sperm, they fertilized. Now you're stuck with this thing.
So you use the term human.
Huh?
What is it that is developing?
A clump of cells.
Is it? Does anything change aside from time and development? Does anything change genetically for this quote unquote clump of cells? Nothing changes. Chromosomes are exactly the same. Genetic makeup is exactly the same. The only difference is the time of development. So you use the term human. I didn't use that term.
The woman is the human that has.
So what's in her is not human unless she says she wants it. Then it's human.
It is the unborn. So it is something that is legally not alive.
Unborn what?
Unborn. What do you want to call it? I will go with your. What would you call it?
So remember, the start of this segment of the argument was that you said we're giving this clump of cells more rights. What I'm saying is we're giving this clump of cells equal rights, because if this clump of cells changes in development, goes past what's it, full term 42 weeks or something like that, if this clump of cells gets to 43 weeks and literally changes location, still depends on still can have disease pass through their mother if the mother breastfeeds, still is entirely dependent on the nutritional intake of the mother if the woman breastfeeds. The shift from the conversation of breastfed babies would be a technology, which is a good thing. It's good that we have technology to say Women don't have to breastfeed. They can choose not to breastfeed. And we have formula that is a good supplement that can aid the baby in development. We don't have that as a womb. If we had that as a womb, the conversation would be entirely different. So,
Yes.
so since we don't have it as a womb and we're confined scientifically to nature,
Yeah.
when we move past the scientific conversation to a moral conversation or ethical conversation, we have to be clear about what it is that we're talking about. Now, if you're going to use the term human, does the term human apply to this thing that is developing? When does it apply? At birth?
So wait. Okay. Okay. Great
Or
question.
if I decide I want it, then it applies.
Okay. And as we're talking about Roe v. Wade, the issue was, at what point does a fetus become, right, a living thing? At what point does life?
That's not a question.
Wait. Hang on. Follow me. Because
Okay, I'll follow you.
that's why the bans or the things that were in effect had weeks, right?
Weeks, yeah.
After a certain point, you can't terminate a pregnancy because there's a heartbeat, right? When there's a heartbeat, there's a living thing, more so than when it's just a fertilized egg, right? Can we find common ground in that? It's easier to say that this thing that has a beating heart and the organs that are formed is different than a fertilized egg.
It's different in development in time. That's what I'm saying. It's different. So when it's a question of viability, yes, but not a question of life. So if we say is what is growing viable to where if you extract it from where it's growing, it has any sort of chance at survival.
Right.
Then I will agree with you. It is about viability. What I'm saying is that viability that we're talking about is directly connected to development. And when this thing is born, not much has changed as far as its level of dependence. What has changed is its physical viability. At the very basic would be that the heart beats by itself and it can breathe on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the organs necessary to
survive,
intake nutrition.
Yes.
Right? So fully developed lungs, digestive tract. So the question becomes, if any one of those vital organs post birth, if any one of those vital organs is compromised, that doesn't change the ontology of what we're talking about. If this clump of cells is born, it will be classified as a human and endowed with certain rights. One of those rights would be for doctors to try to resuscitate it or put it in the NICU if their organs are not fully developed. Well, why do we do that? Is it solely because a mother or a father says, you know what, I really would like to have a baby this time?
No, it's because at that point there's potential viability there, even if it needs assistance. Yes.
One can make the argument the entire process is assistance.
No. So you can't a baby who is born with underdeveloped organs, right, is more akin to a human who is endowed with rights more so than this clump of cells that has not developed into that yet. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but the stage of development has to do with time.
And so again, if I'm the host and I say I don't want this thing that is in me to continue to grow in me, if I do it while it's still just a clump of cells, right, this thing should not have rights because it's not a human. It does.
So the thing is, and the thing with Roe v. Wade is the woman's can we make a direct correlation? And yeah, I'm gonna frame the question like this. It's flawed, but can we make a direct correlation between the autonomy of a woman's body
Yeah.
and this clump of cells? One, is this clump of cells her clump of cells to choose anything about what it does solely genetically?
Yes.
No. How? Because of its location?
Yeah, because it's dependent on me.
That's a product of natural phenomenon. It may be dependent on you, but it is not you. It's not an extension of you.
It is not a thing yet.
It
That is
is a thing.
wait, wait, wait,
It is
wait,
a thing.
wait, wait. Constitutionally, it is not a thing that is deserving of rights.
That's the thing that they're trying to fight against.
What do you mean?
So the question is, should it be? So you say constitutionally it's not something that deserves rights.
Because
People on the other side are saying it does deserve rights because it is a human.
but
And
it's
so
not
the rights that a human should have would be equal rights.
right. But so
Mhm.
okay, in this decision, it's the court is weighing certain things, and there was this one phrase that really got me, and I'm just like, oh, okay, how do we square this circle? How do we make sense of this? That the court or the state has a legislative interest in protecting the life of the unborn.
Yeah,
How can you have life if you are not born?
because you have 9 months in your mother's womb.
So
And you're a living specimen. What however you want to call it. I'm trying to stay away from the moral terms. But you are, as it relates to this, what science would call living, you are living. You would be considered a living thing. The question is whether this thing should be constituted as human or not. Some people are saying it should be, some people are saying it shouldn't be. The problem is that when the should or shouldn't be depends solely on one person's desire for it or not.
it
You're not going to tell someone who says that they're 9 weeks pregnant that that's just a zygote. Don't get too connected to that. If someone comes to your job tomorrow and says, "You know what? I'm happy. I'm 9 weeks pregnant. Me and my husband was trying for a baby," you're not going to say that's not a baby. like you're going to say it's a little compensation. You're not going to say that.
but it is also okay. Okay, I might not say that because I'm a nice guy. You know, I won't. I'm not an asshole. But what I would say though is that I, the person who is living, breathing, an actual citizen of the United States,
Hmm.
should not have my liberty curtailed based on your unborn non-citizen, right? And
But
that
if you get in a car accident with that pregnant woman and the child dies, you're going to jail. How do you explain that?
how do I explain wait, if she's only 9 weeks pregnant and
If
it's
she's pregnant, yeah. If she is pregnant and the child dies, you are going to jail, sir.
why?
It's a double. If both of them die, it's a double homicide. If one of them die, it could be a single homicide.
I don't get that.
I don't get it either, but that's the law.
But okay. Let's rewind. Let's back this up because okay. Um Genetically, the thing that is growing is the thing that it's going to be, but based on how long it is in incubation,
Time
it
of development. Yeah.
it grows into something different.
Hmm.
My question is this: the thing that has been not born, that has not been born.
Hmm.
If I, the host parent, the one who it is growing in, says I don't want it, what it
Hmm.
seems like this law and legislators are saying is you can't change it. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
You
you
have to
can,
take
but
this thing to term, or else you're
yes,
committing a crime.
yes.
against this thing that is not born?
Mm-hmm.
How am I committing a crime against a non-citizen, a thing that is not here?
Well,
It's a question of law, right? Who gets
but
rights?
it's a question of things. So
What
the
do you mean?
thing that you're saying is unborn, that is not here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a human thing?
When
For
does
some people are saying it's a human thing, other people are saying it's not a human thing.
and until that can be unambiguously answered, then it's hard to say that me terminating this thing is murder, which is what the basic.
It's not. Human will be a moral ethical category. Okay. But the science is pretty clear too. It's a living, so it's no question. We have fancy terms like terminate and abort. Okay. But if there is a small oak tree
Yep.
that is growing underneath the ground
Yep.
and I stomp it out,
Mm-hmm.
I've killed the oak tree. That's what I've done. Now I'm not going to go to jail for it, but I've cut off the ability for this oak tree to continue to live and grow. We use terms to abortion, like abortion, to conceal the actual happening. You are, whether we say that this is not a moral issue, I just want to stay in the science for a second.
Okay.
You're terminating something that is living is killing it. And depending on what the it is, depends on whether or not people care. That's all I'm saying. Depending on whether what we classify the it as depends on whether or not people care. Scientifically, the it genetically is the same it that you and I are. Genetically, the only difference is time and development. Now, if we want to attribute some moral, ethical juju to that,
Uh-huh.
then that's when we get into, where do we go from here? My I guess there's a lot of things wrong with our society, and there's a lot of issues that kind of are surrounding the situation. But I think that it's dishonest to make this about women's reproductive rights, and about the autonomy of women's bodies. And the reason why I think that's dishonest is because people are not people because you choose that they are or you don't choose that they are. We don't want to get into that, whether or not you feel or think a person should be a person. That has had really bad repercussions for us in history. Uh, this question of, what is human, what's not human, and who gets to decide and who gets to choose that. So that's my kind of dog in the fight, is like, I don't know if anyone gets the choice to say, well, because I want this clump of cells, it's now human. Because I don't want it, it's not human. Regardless of the reasons behind whether you want or you don't want it. Things like poverty, should people that are poor be dead, not given a chance to live? I think it's hard to sell that to an oppressed people who have risen out of oppression, to say, hey, well, because you're poor, you shouldn't die. You shouldn't have a chance to live. So the whole poverty discussion is more a problem with our society that needs to be solved. Not a problem, not an excuse to say, well, women should be able to do whatever they want with this clump of cells because they're poor, or they won't have enough food, or they won't have enough water, or they won't be able to live uh, healthy lives, or something like that. I think that that's a dishonest uh, argument.
Okay. I don't know that I totally disagree with you on that last point, that just because a child will be born into poverty, you should be aborted. But if I, the parent, know what the struggle is,
Hmm.
know that my kids are whatever, I should have the choice, though, to decide if I want to add to that
You did have the choice to decide whether or not
by having
you
sex
added
or
to
not having sex.
by. I'm not gonna say by having sex or not having sex. That's too like 1950s. The fact of the matter is we've gone a pretty we've come pretty far as to how frequent people can have sex, how often people can have sex using proper uh, medicine.
Birth control.
But not only birth control, men can get vasectomies.
Okay, all right. So,
So
so
also there's maybe there needs to be a push to. I'm pretty sure it's possible to sterilize a male with a pill. Maybe there needs to be push towards male birth control as well. So I'm just saying the science is there. So there's other options. It's not like, well,
why
you
take away
either remain celibate or
why take away someone's choice if it's not clear at when life starts? I mean,
you didn't. So what are you taking away the choice at what?
okay,
What choice is taken away?
if you ban abortions,
Mm-hmm.
I have to have this baby that I might not want, even if I catch it early enough to where it's not developing organs, heartbeat, none of those things, because you, whoever you are, because you decided that I should not be able to have one, I'm now forced to carry to term and try to live with, try to provide for this thing that if I had my choice, I wouldn't have had it.
So now let's back up for a second.
Okay.
The choice that now we're talking about is a choice that was given to you by the law itself. Okay. So you were empowered by a law that said this group of humans don't have rights because they're not born. So you can do whatever you want with this group of humans. They don't have any rights. That's something that was given to you. That's not something that prior to the discussion of prior to the creation of abortion, you wouldn't have understood you having sex and getting pregnant as you being forced to do something. The whole rhetoric of forced assumes a world in which I can walk into a clinic and terminate a pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
That is assumption. What the other side is saying is that shouldn't be assumption. That was a problem and a fault in society and needs to be corrected. Now, regardless of whether we agree with that or not, we have another situation that is at least somewhat similar. A group of people aren't considered human. So you can do whatever you want to this group of people.
That
So if I now endow this group of people with humanity, and you say you're taking away my choice,
see,
we wouldn't let that fly.
right. I get where I see where you're trying to go with that. But there's one fundamental difference in those two.
What's the fundamental difference?
The fundamental difference in those two different groups, I'm assuming that you're talking about those who were classified as chattel or property and not humans. They didn't have any rights, and so you can do anything you want to with them.
They were owned and in society entirely dependent on their owners.
Only by force of law. So
Yes.
here's the thing. Wait, now they weren't dependent on them. Gosh, what is the word? What is the word that I want to use? Like
they were fully dependent on them, except for time and development.
No. There's a slight difference because as an enslaved person, if I had the freedom to run away, I had a great chance of surviving outside of whether or not there was time and development.
You have to be fully developed to run away, sir.
Huh?
You have to be developed to run away. You can't be an infant and run away. You have to be able to walk and you have to be able to run. And you have to be
or
able to salvage food for yourself.
or my parents would have been
Uh-huh.
able to do that, right? So the dependence that you're talking about is because of forced labor and having to be dependent and subservient because of the cultural norms and practices. This, what we're talking
Yeah,
about, the
and I'm
other
saying a
group,
similar thing.
it's not similar though, because you
It's not
cannot.
the, it's not the same. It is similar.
It,
It's not the same. It is similar.
so okay. Look, yes, same. I mean, not the same, similar, but one group that was actually living and working and laboring, if you gave them rights, they could go from that host and make it. If you start giving the zygotes
This,
eggs,
no, it doesn't change. It's still with time and development. If you give a toddler that's 1 year old rights, that toddler by themselves cannot go and do what you're saying. It's still time. Humans operate holistically. We grow with time. That's just who we are. It doesn't matter if you're born or not.
so I think
And
then
your level of dependence will shift depending on the time of development. Like you could be perfectly independent at 40 years old and then entirely dependent at 70.
right. I think what I'm poking at with your argument was, if we say that one group isn't human, so they don't have rights, the enslaved population, if we're using that as an example, it
Mhm.
doesn't jive with the unborn, because if you loose the shackles on those who were living and enslaved, they then would not be dependent on anyone. If you loose the shackles and say, okay, zygote, you are free, you still need that person because of time and development. It hadn't happened.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Now I hear what you're saying. Now put what you're saying in the context of today
what I'm
with
saying,
our fights against injustice and white supremacy and still for some trying to get independence from the state. So you're saying something that we have been free for quite some time,
yes.
and there's still certain things that we don't have access to, and then we need to be dependent on white counterparts for that access, at least for the votes, in order for society to enable us to have that
but
access.
but not for our human existence, not to be able to breathe, not to be able to be get nutrients. We're
That
not.
was a trivia. My point is, in the similarity of the argument is when someone can say what is human and what is not human in a society, it empowers them to do whatever they want to that thing. So I wasn't saying that it was similar from all the whole argument. I say it's the same because the conversation is the same. This is not human. And I'm saying that this is not human so that I can terminate it. That otherwise I would not say that, which is why I brought up the point. Which is why I brought up the point. If a woman comes into your office and says, "I'm 9 weeks pregnant," and she's happy about it, everyone's like, "Yay! You're gonna have a what? A baby." We don't know if she's gonna have a baby. We don't know if something's gonna happen along the course of her pregnancy that is
Mhm.
traumatic, but it's only traumatic because we understand as a baby. You're not going to tell someone at 40 weeks if they lose a child that they want that that wasn't a human because it wasn't born yet, or it wasn't a human because it didn't have all of the organs, or it wasn't a human because it wasn't fully developed.
Did you say at
We
40 weeks?
26 weeks,
That's still
15 weeks, 14 weeks. If a woman has a miscarriage at 14 weeks and comes into your job crying because they lost something that they wanted, you're going to be like, well, you got to remember it's a clump of cells and it wasn't entirely viable. You're never going to say nothing like that. That entire the entire argument, the role of it is intentional so you can dehumanize it and do whatever you want
But
with
is
it.
it scientifically true that at 14 weeks, this thing growing in you might not be viable?
That is scientifically true. Yes.
So why then? And I get it. It would be insensitive. It would be totally assholish for someone to say that. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a lie. That's not incorrect.
It's not a lie, but remember, my point is that let's stop being dishonest wholeheartedly across the board. It's not a lie. It's insensitive, and the reason why it's insensitive is because that mother attributed a human value to the thing growing inside of her. And that mother is just doing what many thousands of years ago women were doing to their children. I can feel something growing inside of me and moving. It must be life. It's not it's not rocket science. It's pretty
So,
experientially clear. Hold up. Here's the other science though. If this happens, whether you wanted the child or not, which is why the rates of depression are so high in women who want abortions. Why are you having depression when nothing happened? You didn't kill anything. Why is there any psychological impact? You don't have a psychological impact when you step on an ant or a cockroach. Nothing happens if you walk into your kitchen right now and you step on a roach, you will have no psychological response. Zero.
I would, because there'll be a roach in my kitchen. But I take it.
You wouldn't have a negative response because you killed the roach. Is my point. So even women, even and you say you want to go science, even women who do not want their children
Yeah.
in clinics that are for abortion, doctors will tell them, listen, this could potentially happen to you. Now, one could say, oh, well, this potentially happens because there's a hormonal imbalance. And I would say that's a great thing to notice. If it was just your body, your hormones would be neutral. So why is there a fluctuation of your hormones if there's
Because
nothing growing inside of you
there's a
that's
parasite.
viable?
There's a parasite that's taking things from me.
That's it. That's good rhetoric. That's great rhetoric. It doesn't fit the mold of a parasite. It
Why
does
not?
so it
Why not?
why does it?
What is a parasite? What does that do?
Let's look at the scientific definition of a parasite. Because I want to be as precise as I can. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. What does it say?
A parasite, according to the CDC, a parasite is an organism that lives on or in a host organism and gets its food from or at the expense of the host. There are three main classes
No,
of
no, you stop
parasites.
reading right there.
No, 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 no,
Parasite.
no, no. We got
Based
to
on
go
the
into the three
definition,
main
it's a
classes because
parasite.
if it's a parasite, what class of parasite is it, sir?
That's a separate question. The
What?
thing that isn't
Oh my
wait, no,
goodness.
no.
If it is a parasite, it has to be classified. What sort of parasite
Wait,
is it?
what was the definition? Read the definition of parasite.
I'll read the definition again. Hold on, let me go back to it. A
And then we
parasite is an
look
organism that lives on or
or
in
okay,
a host organism
wait, hang on,
and
hang on.
gets its food from or at the expense of its hosts.
Now, if we stop right there, this
Mhm.
thing, this clump of cells, this zygote, this embryo fits all of those. Whether or not it doesn't matter which class of parasite, based on the precision of the definition, these things are parasites.
It does matter the class of parasite. That's like saying, for example, hold on, that's like saying, for example, me throwing a water bottle, into a trash can is a sport by definition of a sport. And then I say, well, what sport is it?
That's a different question, though.
That's
As
not a
opposed
different
to
question. If it
no, no,
the
no.
definition is a broad, hold on, the definition is broad and then it's classified into categories. I'm saying if it is a parasite, it should be able to fit into a parasitic category. No?
So, just regardless of categories, does it fit the definition of a
How
parasite?
can you say regardless of the categories if the categories further clarify the definition?
Because so if we're defining a word,
Hmm.
if we can read this word and it fits into that, it may be one or two or three of those categories, but it's still that thing. If it fits in a category of parasite, still a parasite, right? Yes.
No. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Hold on. I'm getting the scientific definition. Okay? Let's just let's just do it this way. Are you ready?
Go for it.
A tick, is a tick a parasite? No, it is parasitic. But if by the definition, a tick lives on and gets his food from a host, it's parasitic, though not a parasite. That's a perfect example. Please tell me how that's not an example. Please explain to me.
So
So a
parasitic.
human can be parasitic. A human could be parasitic insofar as it is a zygote and in the womb of a mother. Is it a parasite ontologically? No, it isn't. That's my point, and that's what the categories would show. Just like a tick. A tick is parasitic. It does things that scientifically you would say this is what a parasite does, but it doesn't fit into a category. It doesn't fit in the categories of parasites.
We talked about in one of our episodes before that our categories and our language limit us from things.
It
Yes.
does. It does. Yeah. Yes.
And so just because it doesn't fit into one of the established categories, if it is showing tendencies and behaviors of this thing, how is it not that thing? If I'm parasitic, why am I not a parasite?
Because we're talking about the different, it's a description versus an ontology. In your being, you're not a parasite. You're not the same as a parasite. Even
But
though
parasite
you can do
is one
an
that lives
an
in.
adult, I as an adult outside of a womb could be parasitic. Like,
That would make you a parasite.
yeah, but I'm not I'm still not a different ontological category. I'm still
Okay. Okay. Read
human.
your three
I'm a
categories of
human
parasites.
parasite.
Read your three categories of parasites. Let's see
Okay,
if
let's
this
now
unborn
we
baby.
done gone down the rabbit hole, but we're gonna go. Okay, the first category. Let me make sure I'm doing it. Protozoa, helminths, and ectoparasites. Okay, so those are the three categories. A protozoa are microscopic one-celled organisms that can be free-living or parasitic in nature. They are able to multiply in humans, which contributes to their survival and also permits serious infections to develop from just a single organism. So that's a protozoa. Helminths are large, multicellular organisms that are generally visible to the naked eye in their adult stages. Like protozoa, helminths can be either free living or parasitic in nature. In their adult form, they cannot multiply in humans. There are three main groups of the helminths derived from the Greek word for worms that are human parasites: flatworms, thorny headed worms, roundworms. Okay, now finally, the ectoparasite. Although the term ectoparasite can broadly include blood-sucking arthropods such as mosquitoes, because they are dependent on a blood meal from a human host for their survival, this term is generally used more narrowly to refer to organisms like fleas, lice, mice that attach on, burrow into the skin, and remain there for relatively long periods of time, weeks to months. Arthropods. So is this a are humans arthropods? Ectoparasites?
I mean,
That would probably be the closest thing.
before it comes out into a fully formed human, it could be one of those things. See, I think it. I
No,
think it.
I think it could. I think it could fit the description of an ectoparasite. So now that we've defined babies as ectoparasites, we can kill them, and we just solved the problem. We solved it.
So we highlighted
We solved it.
more of how um how complicated these things are.
Yeah.
And what I was reading about the decision and what happened and why, interestingly, I agree with you that the Supreme Court probably got it right, is that they looked at two cases to see. So basically what happened, there's the Mississippi abortion clinic, doctor and abortion clinic was challenging Mississippi's 15-week ban on abortions, saying that that violated the due process clause, 14th Amendment due process clause of a woman's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so what the Supreme Court was looking at and taking into account was, did Mississippi's ban on abortions violate this person's freedom based on 14th Amendment?
15 weeks is that's all I'm going to say. 15. You know how long 15 weeks is? 15 weeks. But the other thing that I wanted to just throw in there is, okay, I'm not a pacifist. Maybe my position will be a little bit different. There are certain situations where it is legal in this country to use deadly force. One that's probably the most specific to the Roe v. Wade originally is, remember, this did not include the Texas attempt to criminalize abortion did have the caveat if it risked the life of the mother. And I think that when you move to the conversation of criminalizing abortion, you have to have caveats like that, because we have caveats like that in government. So if you say, for example, that abortion is murder, well, one, now we talk about degrees of murder, okay, as far as, but then also we talk about self-defense. Insofar as the child, for whatever reason, infringes on the life of the mother. When you have equal lives, then you have a different sort of conversation. The child threatens the life of the mother, the child can be terminated. Very simple. That will be more self-defense. It has nothing to do. So and same accommodations can be made for things like incestual rape and rape, although both of them together are less than 5% of the overall reported abortions. Less than 5%. Both of them together. Still, and this was my point from the beginning, the dishonesty of the conversation. To go as initially to say, well, what if she gets raped, or what if there's incest? Is that the honest conversation as to what's really happening? Okay, my body, my choice. It's not your body scientifically. You have no grounds to say something like that. Now, does that mean there needs to be some other situations on the other side? Yes, perhaps absentee fatherhood should be criminalized, and child abandonment and neglect, because that's what it is, right? So it's there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to kind of, if we're going to take this stance on life that people are wanting to take. Uh, Subsidized childcare, demanded maternity leave, a living wage. Who's going to fund, right? For states that don't allow for women to abort their babies if they're mentally or physically disabled, who's going to fund the care for these children that you're forcing women to have? It would need to be the state, because it was the state that forced this woman to have a child that is going to take all of their life to take care of, right? So I think that there are it's a lot of conversation that happen around it. My dog in the fight again is twofold. Let's be honest with what we're talking about. Okay. Let's try to be as clear and as honest with our speech as we can on this issue. And two, I'm sorry, I have to scrap the if you're a guy, you have nothing to say on this issue. I cannot logically accept that as a valid argument. Now, does that make me a bad guy in some situations, and probably will I be indicted for I don't know, male privilege? Potentially. But this is the society that we live in. You do not get to choose on an island in and of yourself, whether you're a man, woman, boy, girl, transgender, whatever, your own laws. You don't get to do that. We get to vote. We have representatives. We all get a say.
But
And
do
thank
we
God we
though?
do.
But do we though? So we're
What you
talking
mean,
about
do we?
honesty as a conversation. Do we really all? Do we have representatives? Do we get a say?
I think people that are highly politically involved do. And what my cultural or historical standpoint would be, how else does a minority influence federal law to establish same sex marriage? Did our LGBTQ, did our LGBTQIA plus friends, did they not have a voice in that? Now, that doesn't take away the oppression that they still face. I'm not saying that. It doesn't make everything great. But in this flawed society, people were able to politically maneuver and sacrifice their time, blood, sweat, tears, in some cases lives to get this law passed to where now they can marry in all of the US. Now I'm not
See,
going to say that as far as how that's implemented, it's equal. It's not. But I'm saying for that to even happen would be suggestive that there's still some sort of hope in maneuvering the system, maneuvering a corrupt system.
I don't know that I agree.
Okay,
I hear
well,
what you're
so
saying,
how do you say women's suffrage, women's rights? Because there are tons of countries that are patriarchal that women don't have rights to vote. So how did
so
that happen?
we see and live daily in a situation where our words and our actions are different. So on
Hmm.
paper, you can have these rights. In practice, no. And so I think a lot of a lot of these things to where representation shows up and gets done, it's it's only able to do that because it benefits those there's a financial benefit to people in it. And so we can say, yes, we're going to do these things, but the implementation is where it's lacking. So, yes, we did it. Well, we're getting to, and so I've done this thing, but
But
I didn't.
the legislation empowers us to be able to fight for the justice that we're trying to see.
But you shouldn't have to
So
fight. You shouldn't have to fight for justice for things that the legislation is supposed to fix.
yeah, you should. What are you talking
Why?
about? Because
Why?
they're criminals.
Who?
Name one. Name the people are criminals. Name one. Name one law. If you literally have to fight to establish justice at every turn.
But
Every
that's
turn. If somebody steals your stuff, you have to make a police report. And in some cases, you have to be on top of the police because they're underfunded and undermanned in order to try to get your stuff back. Or you have to be on top of the insurance company. So you're always having to fight to I
so
guess
there is.
make things right.
I, I hear what you're saying, but that statement, those statements are highlighting and indicating that we aren't a just society and that these things that should be, right, are not, even though we
Mhm.
proclaim these things. You know what I mean? So
I
so
would
it's easy.
say that although we profess and claim these things, right? Although we profess and claim these things are not always realized and they don't always manifest because we're still people. But please show me one country, one that has a better alternative. Just one.
Next time I'll have one.
Show me one country that you can say, you know what, throughout history, their system does seem to course correct a little bit better than ours. I'm not saying our system is right. No, it's absolutely flawed, absolutely corrupt. But I'm saying that I'm asking posing the question, can flawed humans create anything other than flaw? That's my question. It's like, yeah. So
Flawed
you don't,
humans,
for example, you don't have the right to go into a public place and to start shooting. It doesn't
unless you
stop
like
people from doing it. No, even if you're a white guy, you don't have that right. Now you might get out alive.
so I have
You
that
got a
right.
better chance of survival if you
I
white
have
if
that
you
right.
white, but
Yeah.
but you're still gonna get arrested, even if that's only for your clan members on the sheriff's department to save face. You still got to get arrested,
All right. All right. All right.
and that's because of written law.
So can flawed people get produce anything but flaw? Flawed people can produce better if
Better,
if
yep.
we aren't shackled and handicapped to only believe that we have to operate within the system that we have because it's better than the alternative. We can do better than what we have, even if it's better than the alternative.
Yes, yeah, I would agree. We can do better than what we have, even though what we have may be better than alternative. I guess my point is that the court that the track that we're on allows us to do better and to keep pressing to go further. And I I just personally don't know if killing babies is that progression better.
Okay, we're gonna end on this. I'm gonna say one last thing, then you have
Because we talk about this the whole night if we could.
so we when you term it as killing babies,
Hmm.
that's loaded, and that's also somewhat disingenuous if we're having an honest conversation.
It's a shot. I
Yeah,
agree with that. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
And
shot.
so um the slippery slope part though,
Hmm.
right, is where, and I agree with you, the conversation about, well, it's gonna do this, it's gonna do this, that's how politicians and these political apparatus, that's how they get people engaged. If I'm
Yeah.
talking about nuance, I'm gonna tune you out because I don't understand that mumbo jumbo, right?
Yep.
So that's us. That's the illiteracy of the electorate and all of those things. But there are real challenges when certain things that were deemed as rights to due process and equal protection under the 14th, if hey, Roe didn't give you that, the Constitution, because the thing it says is the Constitution doesn't explicitly give you a right to an abortion. And so anything that's not explicitly written in the Constitution could be on its way out based off of this precedent that they just set.
Yeah.
And that's some of the challenges.
And that's the challenge and that's the anxiety. And it's a
Yeah.
real one. And
Yeah.
it could be the start of a potential civil war. And I think that that's what, and when I say the start, I mean legislation normally precedes war. The people, and it's not just like one thing, even though the one thing might be what we record in the history books. It's the time of moving in a direction that there's a large constituency in the country that doesn't want to move that way.
Yeah.
And I think that if they continue to kind of revoke how we've understood rights, it can be a bad day.
Yeah.
It can get pretty bad.
And for that, killing babies ain't gonna be a good thing.
It's not. But the reason why I say it like that is because one, that's how the radicalized view would say it. And I think that for our listeners and for people on both sides, they need to think about if someone says killing babies, because I saw this post. Imagine being upset for allowing babies to live. And I thought, what sort of person writes this post? Not the sort of person that wants to have a conversation. This is the sort of person that wants to drive a moral point,
Mm.
right? They don't really want to have a conversation, and they don't really want to talk about um, all of the things that go into an agreement. The reason why I say it is because one, I think it carries that connotation to it, but also I think it gives a certain weight that everybody on the other side is not thoroughly excited about terminating a pregnancy. Some of them are making a tough decision. They don't see no way out, no hope, and it is for them a killing of something, whether that be, some future that they wanted, that they saw fading away, or whatever it may be. It is something serious, and I think that level of seriousness of the conversation needs to be at the forefront. That we're talking about real people that's making hard decisions,
Mm,
and some of these decisions that they're making are in the height of desperation. And what do
right.
you do in a desperate moment, right? So I
Okay.
think that I personally think that this is such a huge topic, and there's so many factors that go into it, that it's really hard to, in my opinion, it should be the loosest of laws in either direction, for the sake of really focusing on what's actually going on. But realistically, I've never seen, from all the people that I know and that were confident to talk to me about their experience and share and vulnerable to share their experience. No one ever told me that, like, you go into an abortion clinic, they're like, "You ready for an abortion?" and they popping champagne. It's
Traumatic
a
experience.
solemn moment. They want to make sure that you have somebody with you. Are you going to be alone after this? They, even people who say that it should be legal, recognize the severity of what's going on for the female body, and what's going on for the clump of cells, the fetus, the zygote, right? So
This is
that's all I have to say.
yeah, no, these are the types of conversations we have here on the Masterminds podcast, and this it's not the end of it because there's so much more to dig into and dig through. So just stay tuned, join us, and engage as you see fit because this is how we get better by having the conversations. Till next time, deuces.